Coming out of Sunday's season opening loss to the 49ers, the initial update on rookie Nick Emmanwori appeared to be a good one for the Seahawks, but that initial prognosis may have been a bit too optimistic. I'm going to be diving into a suboptimal update on the explosive second-round pick on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, whether you're in Issaquah, Washington, or Juneau, Alaska. Thanks for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Less than 24 hours after the Seahawks suffered a difficult 17-13 loss to the 49ers to open their 2025 season, they received some not-so-ideal news on one of their top rookies. Could potentially be out for a while. I'm going to be digging into that latest update from Mike Macdonald and what it could mean for Seattle's defense for the foreseeable future. And it's our first Monday musings of the regular season, a deep dive. I've watched the All-22, looking back at yesterday's game, what stood out to me on offense and defense. Tons of analysis coming out of this season opener in this episode. So without further ado, let's get to it. Now to your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Seattle was really fired up going into Sunday's opener, not just because it was the first game of the season, but a great opportunity to see several of their rookies make an impact. Among those, safety Nick Emmanwori was expected to play a major role for the Seahawks in this first contest going up against George Kittle and the 49ers. Unfortunately, that debut did not last very long. Emmanwori, only a few plays into the first defensive series, tackle for loss, celebrated while hobbling around. Got to give him some credit for finishing the celebration, but clearly had a significant injury that was bothering him. He tried to come back into the game on special teams after a visit to the locker room. X-rays at that point were negative. They thought that Nick Emmanwori would be able to come back in the game. Lasted that one play, and then returned to the locker room, did not play another snap. And after the game, Mike Macdonald said that the Seahawks didn't think he had a high ankle sprain, which that was a positive update because if it's a lower ankle, that's one that usually is going to heal faster. High ankle sprains are much tougher to come back from. But on Monday, it was a complete 180 for Mike Macdonald, and he had this to say on Seattle's rookie safety. Let's call it week to week at this point. If we make a move, it would be in the next day or two because we have to decide whether or not to make a move on that front. Mike Macdonald confirming that it was indeed a high ankle sprain suffered by Nick Emmanwori, and that's why he wasn't able to come back into the game, couldn't stay in there after he returned for that kick coverage play, did not play the rest of the game. And this is a slippery slope. This is an injury that is really tricky for a number of reasons. And some of you that are listening, maybe you were an athlete at some point and maybe you had a high ankle sprain. I had one when I was in high school. Luckily, it happened during summer training and I was healed by the time the start of the season came in the fall. But this is a painful injury. High ankle sprains are a pain to deal with. And the biggest problem, anytime you're talking about a sprain in general, but high ankle sprains seem like they are especially tricky to diagnose in terms of how long a player is going to be out, because it's not like a broken bone where you generally have a timetable. 8 weeks, you'll be back on the field. When you're talking about sprains, particularly ankle sprains, there's different grades for these injuries. So if this was a mild sprain, maybe Nick Emmanwori is going to be ready to play in a couple of weeks. Right now, as Mike Macdonald says, it's a week-to-week proposition. But the fact that he mentioned that injured reserve was under consideration and that a move was under consideration on the roster, if Seattle ends up making that move in the next day or two, then that would tell you that they thought it was going to be difficult for him to be back within 4 games. And if it is a more significant grade ankle sprain, I've seen players miss multiple months with this injury. So that is really the key here. Mike Macdonald did not disclose that today And I don't know that he would have been able to, as a football coach, I don't know if he would have been able to answer that specifically in terms of what grade of a sprain this is, but that is going to dictate what Seattle's decision-making process is here. If this was a mild one, in the next day or two, maybe he starts feeling a lot better. The Seahawks feel like, well, maybe we can keep him on the roster. Maybe he'll just miss 1 or 2 games. But if it gets beyond that point, if there's any cloudiness on whether or not Nick Emmanwori is going to be able to come back in the next 2 or 3 weeks or longer, then injured reserve with designation to return makes a lot of sense because they're going to need that roster spot. D'Anthony Bell is on their practice squad. I would anticipate that he would get signed to the roster to add to their safety position with Emmanwori being out. But this is going to be really fascinating to see what happens the next couple of days, because if this is a more significant injury, the other thing about ankle sprains, particularly high ankle sprains, it's not like when you're looking, again, broken bones, when it's healed, it's healed. You shouldn't have any issues with re-injuring or aggravating. Once that injury is healed up, you should be good to go. High ankle sprains, if it is not 100% recovered, and you can feel like it is, like you could be running around cutting and feel great, but you're not quite fully healed, one wrong step and just the right step, you can re-aggravate that injury and it can be worse. And then you could be potentially looking at missing a large chunk of the season, if not the entire season. There have been players that have had high ankle sprains that have ended up missing the entire season as a result, especially because of the ability to have the injury flare up and to have a setback. That is the biggest issue here. So Seattle's going to have to be cautious. If they think that there's a chance that in a couple of weeks that he really is going to be ready to go, and they feel like it is as mild as possible in terms of grading, then maybe they do hang on to him on the roster for a couple of weeks and hope to get him back by week 4, week 5. But this could definitely be an injury here in the next day or two. Seattle decides, look, we don't think he's going to be 100% ready. We're risking him re-injuring it if we bring it back too quickly. So we got to make sure that he's right before he comes back. Then injured reserve becomes a very strong possibility for the Seahawks. And if that happens, as I mentioned, D'Anthony Bell, that would be the natural fit to bring up. D'Anthony Bell is not Nick Emmanwori. They are not the same player, but he's 6'2", 209 pounds. He can play more of that in-the-box safety role. Tayakata played a few snaps yesterday. That is not his game at all. Tayakata is not somebody that's going to come up and play like a strong safety, like an extra linebacker. D'Anthony Bell at least can give you some of that flexibility, and he's played a lot of games in the NFL on defense and special teams. So I would think that D'Anthony Bell would be in line to not only get called up, but to get some snaps on defense with Emmanwori being out. But we saw it in yesterday's game, what that does to Seattle. Emmanwori is such a difference maker in terms of positional flexibility and what you can do with your formations and your packages on defense. They don't have another guy on this team that is going to be able to fill that. So we saw yesterday Devin Witherspoon playing a lot more in the slot again, like they did last year. Josh Jobe, Reek Woolen being the boundary corners, and that was a lighter lineup. Obviously, Witherspoon is not near as big as Emmanwori. Now, he packs a punch. He is more than capable of playing that slot spot, but it does take away some of that interchangeability that the Seahawks have when Emmanwori is on the field with those 3 safeties and all the different things they can do. And it puts more strain on your second linebacker because I think Emmanwori can play in that spot as well. So now Tyrese Knight, Drake Thomas, those guys are going to be on the field more than maybe they would have been in a typical situation with Nick Emmanwori being healthy. So there's going to be some moving parts here. There might be some things the Seahawks have really geared their playbook towards with the rookie in the lineup that they're going to have to lock up for a little bit. They're going to have to go to some different things, make some adjustments with the personnel they have. And last year they were able to do just fine without it. But there are a lot of wrinkles that Nick Emmanwori gives this playbook, this defense, that now are going to be off the table or not be near as effective without him. So it is a big loss for any games that he misses. You're hoping that it's one that he's only going to need to miss a couple games and that he can stay on the roster. But it sounds like they are definitely considering the injured reserve option. And anytime you're talking about a high ankle sprain, that is very much on the table. So we should know tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest what's going to happen to that front. If they haven't made a move by Wednesday or Thursday, then that would be trending towards, we think he's got a chance to be back on the quicker end of the spectrum. If he is placed on injury reserve, then he's obviously going to miss 4 games minimum, and who knows what that timeline looks like. Again, these are injuries that can be tricky to peg in terms of timeline, just because everybody heals differently with sprains. We don't know the grade of the injury, the severity of it. Those are all factors to consider that are going to determine when he's back on the field, and they got to make sure that he's 100% right before they throw him back into the mix to avoid re-injury. When I come back, it's Monday Musings, going to be diving into the all-22 tape, some of the observations I made going back and watching film. We're going to start on offense, which was a real struggle for the Seahawks in their 17-13 loss to the 49ers. We'll get to that up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends at Prize Picks, the daily app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football being back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get into the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. I've been playing Prize Picks lately, and it's such a fun way to stay locked in for the season. It's quick, easy, and honestly my favorite way to follow along with football. I love checking the projections, like Josh Allen for more or less than 270 passing yards. Obviously, he eclipsed that against the Baltimore Ravens. Or Saquon Barkley for more or less than 1 rushing touchdown. Coming up this week, as far as max discounts, on 9/14, Travis Kelce, 0.5 receiving yards. So make sure to check that one out on Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get 50% or $50 in lineups after your play with your first $5 lineup. That's the code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Hey, Seahawk fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You could make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already need. At first, I thought this was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash it out anytime to either your bank account or to PayPal or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now using my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN for a limited time 25-cent per gallon bonus. That's the promo code TOUCHDOWN. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks opening the season with a 17-13 loss to the 49ers yesterday at Lumen Field. 4th straight loss to San Francisco at home. That is a streak that has been prolonged for another season, barring a playoff rematch happening at Lumen Field in January. Going to have to wait until 2026 to try to snap that streak against their bitter rivals. And there were a lot of chances for the Seahawks, obviously, to win this game. They just couldn't make the plays they needed to in the closing moments. The 49ers, they came through in the clutch. The Seahawks did not. A lot of plays that if one or two things went differently, we'd be having a much different discussion. But as we do every Monday, it's time for our Monday musings. Went back and watched the All-22, and it's always interesting because I love the saying, it's never as good as you think, it's never as bad as you think. And I think when you're looking at the Seahawks offense, I'm going to say it's not great performance, but it certainly was not as bad as it looked watching live. There's a lot of things that stood out that it felt like were positive steps, even if the third down conversions were not there, the early downs were not where they needed to be. There's a lot of things to work on, clearly. But the first thing that I want to talk about here, looking at the film, and I kind of felt this way coming out of the game anyway, or yesterday, those of you that listened to the post-game show last night, talked about Sam Darnold a little bit. I think Sam Darnold was the least of the problems for the Seattle Seahawks on offense. I thought he did a really good job of getting the football out of his hands in a timely manner. What we had seen in training camp in his brief preseason audition, it showed up. He was getting the ball out quickly. A lot of the plays that the Seahawks had, though, they had screens. They had a lot of these quick passes, dinking and dunking. Didn't take a lot of shots downfield. He missed a couple of throws, but his receivers didn't help him either. Cooper Kupp should have had a first down on the third down throw. It was a slant. The ball was thrown right on the money, and for whatever reason, Cooper Kupp just didn't see it through. The ball just shot past him. His receivers were having trouble with separation, so there were a couple of times that he had to go off his first read, going second. Jackson Smith-Njigba was the only one that was consistently getting open. But I thought that overall the accuracy was there. Darnold didn't have any plays throwing the football where he put the ball in harm's way. There weren't any close calls with interceptions out there. Completed around 70% of his passes. I thought he played a pretty clean game. I would like the play calling to help him out a little bit better and help the guys on the outside. But I felt like Sam Darnold played a pretty solid game. The least of the problems for the Seahawks in this contest on offense. Second thing, we got to get the play passes going. And Mike Macdonald was talking about today, it almost felt like a post-Ryan Grubb game. And I don't want to say that that's where things are at after one game, but it was a similar response in the sense that the Seahawks had one play action pass. They had two play fakes. One of those ended up turning into a scramble for Sam Darnold. That is not going to cut it. And I'm not asking Clint Kubiak to suddenly change what he's done in the past. He has never been a high-volume play action play caller, and that's okay. He's been incredibly efficient with play action when he has called it. Last year, the Saints are one of the best teams in the league at yards per reception on play action passes. So they were explosive with them, even if they were in the middle of the pack in terms of how many they called. But calling one play action pass is not going to get it done, especially against a team like the 49ers, where they were trying to get that run game going early. And there were some moments where they ran the football fairly well. It was inconsistent. It was a mixed bag. But not even working off that with play action, a more shotgun than I anticipated, but they were still under center more than 40% of the time. You have to mix in more play passes. Mike Macdonald knows that. It was kind of a reminder of last year. I'm not expecting Clint Kubiak to have that issue most weeks, but for whatever reason, this game, that was not something that happened. They've got to get more play action passes mixed in to go off that run game and play into some of the strengths of Sam Darnold's game. So that was the second big thing that really jumped out. Just I kept waiting and waiting for more play action plays. I knew they didn't have many, but when I got to the end of my study and realized it was literally one, that is not going to cut it. You have got to have more play action sprinkled in there in this offense, especially with there being such an emphasis on running the ball. You got to have those play action plays. So that was a big negative for me coming out of this contest. Third thing, if you want a big positive coming out of this game, Abraham Lucas at the end obviously got bullied by Nick Bosa, drove back into Sam Darnold, led to the game-ending fumble. You had a couple of pressures early in the game where Darnold got hit, but he only took one quarterback hit in this game because I'm not counting the one with the ball coming out there. His own guy hit him. That was not a defender making that play. The offensive line generally did a really good job, and Darnold helped them out by getting the ball out quickly, but I thought the pass protection was pretty darn good for most of this game. When they did drop back to throw, Darnold had time to go through a couple of progressions, and he wasn't under frequent duress. He was not pressured a bunch of times. Again, one quarterback hit. I thought that his ability to get the ball out quickly, coupled with the pass protection, was really rock solid for 95% of this game. So if you're wanting a silver lining here offensively, the 49ers have weapons getting after the quarterback. Nick Bosa was able to get a few pressures in there. But really, I thought this front line did an excellent job keeping Sam Darnold clean. Mike Macdonald's viewpoint that way after the game, it proved to be exactly what I saw on the film. And across the board, really, it was a strong effort from the entire offensive line with just a couple of plays that ended up hurting them, with that last one being the most notable, Lucas losing that one and getting drove back by Nick Bosa. It's unfortunate it happened there when it did and led to the game-ending turnover, but I liked what I saw from this offensive line in pass protection. What I didn't like going back and watching, it was all about the targets in the run game. And Mike Macdonald emphasized this today. When you are running a zone-centric offense, it's not gap. You're not just assigned a gap that you have to block. This is about the targets and where guys are at, and different fronts are going to dictate who you are going to be taking on zone runs. It seemed like the Seahawks had some issues with knowing who to target, taking the right angles in the blocking game yesterday, particularly in the middle of the game. And I think that that's something you can expect when you are playing an entire game for the first time and you're in this new offense and you're going up against starters for the first time for a full game. There's going to be growing pains. There were certainly some runs where the blocking up front was solid. There were a lot of plays where one or two guys didn't execute their assignment, and run plays are generally not going to work if you have one or two linemen that don't do their jobs. NFL defenders are going to clean the running back up in the backfield or the line of scrimmage pretty much every time. So there's cohesiveness there that needs work. There's target issues. They're going to have to go back and watch the film and work on that this week. I expect that's going to be an area they're going to improve quite a bit over the next few weeks as they continue to get reps stacked together as a unit. But the run game was definitely inconsistent from a blocking standpoint. There were some positives. It was not the most bleak run blocking tape that I've seen. We saw a lot of that last year. There were some positive plays, but there's also a lot where the Seahawks are going to have to really clean things up. The physicality was there. Now we got to get the targeting down, got to get the technical stuff down with those zone plays for this offense to really get that run game clicking in the next couple of games. They're going to have to quickly rebound from that and adjust to some of the things that they didn't execute in this football game. Up next, going to shift gears to the defense and maybe a little bit of love for the special teams as well, continuing our first Monday musings of the 2025 season. Don't go away. You're listening to Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Game Time. The NFL season is officially here, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle, whether it's login screens, prices jumping at checkout. It's a frustrating process, and that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You're always going to get 100% authentic tickets. They're going to be delivered on time at the best price. Plus, all the fees are included. So you're not going to get any secret fees. The price you see is the price you pay. I pull up Game Time in just a couple of taps. I get amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite NFL games as low as $100. The app made it super simple. I could even see the exact view from my seat before buying. And they offer zone deals as well. Pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. It's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any of the other ways that I've bought tickets in the past. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's the promo code LOCKEDONFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, download Game Time today. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in on this late Monday show. Thanks, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate all the everydayers out there. The Seahawks falling to 0-1, a tough 17-13 loss to the 49ers at Lumen Field yesterday, as we do every Monday, taking a deep dive into what I saw in the All-22, what jumped out to me, rewatching this game, talked offense last segment. Now let's look at the defensive side of the football. And want to start the conversation off, interestingly enough, at the inside linebacker position. And I was already planning on talking about this before Mike Macdonald this morning on Seattle Sports 710 said that there is a competition on at that will linebacker spot. I was kind of wondering a little bit about that going into this podcast today, because watching the film, I really liked what Drake Thomas did in his limited action. I believe I had him down for 15 snaps on the defensive side of the football. Tyrese Knight played 74% of the snaps in this game. So it was still mostly Tyrese Knight, who showed some rust. There were some run plays where he was not as decisive as we've seen him in the past. Had a couple times where he didn't make the best read, had a couple times in coverage where Brock Purdy was able to pick on him a little bit, but he hadn't really played up until this last week of practice for more than a month. So he's trying to get his feet back underneath him. I expect 48 is going to be fine, but Seattle's in a position right now where they can do some rotating, and Drake Thomas gives you some different wrinkles at that will linebacker spot. Ernest Jones's interception, it was a phenomenal play on that drop back deep into the secondary, high pointing that football, all the credit to him. But Brock Purdy, that play happened in part because of the blitz that Drake Thomas made and his ability to get past Christian McCaffrey in pass protection and get a hit on Brock Purdy. The throw was a little bit underthrown. It made it that Ernest Jones could reach up and get that ball and that highlight reel interception. Drake Thomas set that up. And so I think that he does some things that maybe are a little different skill set wise than Tyrese Knight. And even if Knight's going to stay the starter, maybe Drake Thomas is going to get a handful of snaps every game. And it might depend on the opponent that they're playing as well. But Mike Macdonald said there's a competition going on there. Tyrese Knight's going to have to get his feet back underneath him and start playing the way he did last year. I expect that it's going to happen. I think that's the best case scenario for the Seattle Seahawks this year. You got to have Tyrese Knight playing at a higher level. And I think once he's gotten more reps and he's been more removed from that time off in August, that he's going to be in good shape. But this is very much a competition that is on right now. And Drake Thomas is going to get some opportunities to show what he can do. So that was the first thing that jumped out to me, just a couple of plays that got to see number 42 making an impact positively out there and justifying maybe getting some more opportunities next week in Pittsburgh against the Steelers. Second thing, the defensive line, at least in the interior, to me, they played up to the lofty expectations. Big Cat, as expected, was dynamic, very difficult to block, blew up a few plays. DeMarcus Lawrence, 2 tackles for loss. He was my game ball winner yesterday. It was even more impressive watching the film, just seeing some of the jarring hits that he was making on blockers, knocking guys off their feet. It was really fun to see where he was fitting in there. And Byron Murphy II, he had a really solid game yesterday as well. Tackle for loss, a couple other big plays in the line of scrimmage. And you had to see his slipperiness, got involved, pressuring the QB a couple of times. I like what I saw in this first game for that interior defensive line. Jaron Reed did some things. I was surprised to see he only played 50% of the snaps. A little older player, going to try to keep him fresh. But I thought that rotation they had on the defensive line, DeMarcus Lawrence moving in and out. We had to see Leonard Williams play some as a big end in this game as well. That defensive line was stout. They played to the level that you expect from this group, both the veterans and the younger guys. So that's an exciting situation coming out of this first game. Now let's get to maybe the biggest negative, and it's positive to an extent too. I'm looking at a discussion. Mike Macdonald talked about the running back position, that both Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet are going to get their opportunities. Linebacker, the competition's on. Tyrese Knight, Drake Thomas. Now I'm wondering, I'd be curious to be a fly on the wall in the coach's office when it comes to the cornerback room right now. And Mike Macdonald didn't do anything to squash this idea with some of the things that he said today in his press conference at the VMAC. I asked him specifically about Josh Jobe, who had an interception yesterday. That was a fantastic leaping pick on Brock Purdy. Had a couple of other really nice plays in the run game. He was targeted 5 times in this game, gave up 1 catch for 1 yard. He was sticky. He was all over receivers. And he just seems like he's a 1A Mike Macdonald guy. He might not be the most athletically gifted player, but he's kind of in that Kobe Bryant mold where he is a guy that, mitigates athletic concerns or perceived limitations with his physicality, his toughness, his football IQ, doing things the right way, his effort. You see that with Josh Jobe. And I thought he was the best player defensively for the Seahawks yesterday. He was fantastic. Again, 1 catch for 1 yard and 5 targets. He had an interception. He was all over the place. Reek Woolen, it's already been well documented, the 2 missed opportunities late in the game, including the game-winning touchdown for the 49ers, where he looked to be in prime position to, at minimum, knock that ball to the ground. You'd expect an interception from a former receiver in that instance, and allowed the tight end Tongas to come in there and say he'd intercepted the pass away from the cornerback so that he could get the touchdown and won the battle for the football. And Mike Macdonald was hesitant to come out and say that Riq Woolen was going to have snaps lost. But at the same time, he said Josh Jobe is competing to get more snaps. And so it makes you wonder. He made it very clear. You know, when a guy's making plays like this, you have to keep playing him on the field. You got to keep giving him more opportunities. Josh Jobe is doing that right now. And those were huge mistakes at the end of the game by Riq Woolen. You can't have a fourth-year corner, a guy that's got the snaps under his belt now that Riq Woolen does. You can't have mistakes. You know, one of those maybe, but doing both of them, it was a really rough drive. I'm wondering if we could see a situation here where Seattle starts to trust Josh Jobe more than Riq Woolen. And we'll see. It's one game. The Seahawks are confident that Woolen's going to be able to bounce back from this. But Josh Jobe, just every time he's getting his opportunities dating back to last year, he has seized those opportunities. And again, he checks off all the boxes that Mike Macdonald's looking for. He might not be the caliber athlete that Riq Woolen is. He doesn't have the length. He doesn't have the size. But at minimum, you've got him now there very much on the heels of Riq Woolen with more consistency. And he is pushing Woolen for playing time right now. So I'm wondering if there's going to be some difficult conversations that are coming in that coaching office here soon if Riq Woolen is not able to bounce back here and start making the plays that you're expecting a former Pro Bowl cornerback to make, especially with all the gifts that he has physically and athletically. He's got to be a much better finisher. Josh Jobe right now has the edge there finishing plays, which is crucial as a defensive back, particularly in Mike Macdonald's scheme. Last but not least, let's give some love to the special teams here. I thought that was as good of a season opener in the third phase of the game as I have seen since I've been covering the Seattle Seahawks. They were flying downfield on kick and punt coverage, making hard hits. And if a guy did miss a tackle, they slowed down the returner. Other guys came in swarming. And aside from one return where Sky Moore got a little bit of wiggle room, they did a really good job bottling up the returners for the 49ers in this game. You had the blocked field goal, the recovery there by DeMarcus Lawrence. Jason Myers was perfect right down the middle on all of his kicks. Michael Dixon was booting it in midseason form. It was hard to find negatives on special teams, really. This was a fantastic all-around special teams performance. Jay Harbaugh's got to be excited about that. Mike Macdonald's got to be excited about it. So again, you look back, not a ton of negatives here in this All-22 review. There were certainly a lot of things that need cleaned up. It's week one, though. Tough loss. Guys are, it stings. They know they had an opportunity to win that game, but I feel confident coming out of this game, watching the offense, defense, special teams, that there are better days ahead. I do think on offense, getting a healthy Tariq Young back and Jake Bobo back, I think those are guys that can help this football team right now as they're looking for complementary weapons in the passing game. Nick Emmanwori being out is a buzzkill, but the Seahawks have a ton of talent and depth on the defensive side of the football. They're just going to have to make some adjustments schematically with some of the things they're not going to be able to do if Emmanwori's not out there for the next several weeks. Those adjustments Mike Macdonald will absolutely be able to make, and the special team was great. Carry that over moving forward. You could have one of the better special teams units. That was maybe the biggest surprise for me because they had some issues in the preseason. But I liked what I saw on defense for the most part. There were some missed opportunities. There were missed tackles, some busted assignments. Week one, it happens. Special teams really good. Offense, it just feels like the game plan's got to be better and the play calling's got to be better. It's on Clint Kubiak to get things going for Darnold and the playmakers. And I think the run game is going to gradually improve by week as this offensive line gels together in this new offense. So don't panic yet. It's week two now. You just have one game in the mix. Week one is always tough to figure out what's going to happen. Now you got to learn from those mistakes you made so that you can start winning football games. And the Seahawks are trying to do that this week, gearing up for the Steelers. As always, you can follow me at X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, I'll be rejoined by Rob Rang. We will have a little Tell the Truth Tuesday action, some thoughts from him on this 49ers game before we turn the page and look at what's new with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Going to be a jam-packed episode. Make sure to listen in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.